Okay, so I'm going to open today's presentation on an introduction, and I want to emphasize that word, an introduction to human-centered design thinking. Both Yasmin and I teach design thinking within several of our courses, particularly the courses on social entrepreneurship. So our goal today is to introduce you to the concept, have a couple of polls to check your understanding. So we have practiced doing polls before, so we're good with that. And then Yasmin and I are going to do a little role play where we're going to kind of demonstrate the first step on human-centered design thinking, which is empathy. And we are recording today's session. So Aisha, Arkadita, if the students couldn't get in, we can share the recording and they can see it at a later date. Yasmin, are we ready to get started? All right. So what is human-centered design thinking? And remember, everyone, I love, Arkadita just gave me my first reaction of the day, so I love reactions. Remember, you can raise your hand, you can tell me you don't understand something, right? So design thinking, and we like to put human-centered design thinking in front of that. It's really about a different way to solve problems, right? So it's a creative tool. It's meant to be very visual, which for many business students is a challenge. And this human-centered design thinking balances what is desirable, what is feasible, what is financially viable, and ethically sustainable. And before we go off this slide, I want to make note of the little arrow there, and it says design thinking starts here, which is the desirability. And when we're thinking about desirability, we mean desirable to whom, right? So desirable to our users. So you'll see some examples as we go through empathy, but that's really important that you remember that we start with what is the human need first, then we go through those other viable, feasible, and sustainable. Okay? All right. So we've talked a little bit about what is design thinking, right? And it helps us in the chain of change. The reason that we're doing this here for you is remember that your Rollins students, their entire course is based around this concept. So today is to give you a little introduction, and we want to encourage you when you interact with the Rollins students to ask them about how they are using design thinking and consider how you might use design thinking when you're helping your entrepreneur. So sometimes when people think about design thinking, they emphasize the word design, right? And so I want to just go through a little bit and explain what design thinking is not. Okay, so design thinking is not an aesthetic. We're not trying to turn you into artists or architects who think only about what it looks like, the product, the service, the thing you are designing, right? So it's not aesthetic. Also, design is not an event. A lot of folks think, well, I put together this event, I've designed this event. It is much deeper, it is much more. Furthermore, design is not a product or a service. So a lot of folks think that their design is finished when they've got the product in their hand. And on the contrary, design starts with the desirability. Design starts with the user or the consumer in mind, and we don't build anything until we have a deep understanding of what the consumer or the user needs. Okay? And finally, design is not an experience. So by that, I mean, right, the French Laundry is a very famous restaurant in California, which is highly ranked, Michelin 5-star, and it's all about the experience. But again, if you've not thought about what the consumer wants when they go to such a high quality restaurant, right, then you've missed the human-centeredness of the design. Okay? So what is design thinking? And you notice I keep putting that word thinking in there because design thinking is a mindset. So it's a perspective. So what we have to do when we do design thinking is adapt the perspective of the user. So for us in Chain of Change, right, that user is your entrepreneur who you are going to be working with in the field. So that focus is on the person or the people with whom you will be working. So your first task, right, is really trying to understand what about her made her start this business? What about her makes her continue this business? What are her challenges that she has? How does she feel when she starts her business? How does she feel when she runs her business? What does she do to run the business? Okay. So keep your focus on the person, and the other things, the feasibility, the viability, that will come along. So we're moving from the concentration on innovations, which are the things, to a focus on the innovators, which are the people. So those people could be individuals. Oops, one more back for me, Yasmin. Those innovators could be individuals, but more likely we like to think of innovators as a team of people, because each of us have strengths and each of us have challenges. And that eventually those individuals might come together to form an organization. So design thinking is about innovators who collaborate, right? So one of the things we've talked about before in some of our sessions is the Indian education system, and to many respects, the US education system is really focused on individual accomplishment. So with design thinking, the base of it is a collaborative effort. So we're moving from design, where the focus is on the individual, the product, the engineering, the art, to design thinking, where we're forming teams, we're taking you through a process of experiences, and we're thinking about the desirability, feasibility, sustainability. Sorry, whoo, lost my train of thought for a moment there. Okay, so here's our first poll. What industry, we have two polls maybe. What industry can use human-centered design thinking? So can everyone see the poll? Yes, okay, great. Thank you, Anisha. All right, great. Thank you, Suji. So go ahead and answer that first question. What industry can use human-centered design thinking? Yes, only answer the first question for now. Let's see if I hit submit. Submit. We have a little glitch, Yasmin. If I only answer the first question, I won't be allowed to submit.
But it still shows what you voted on.
Only to you.
Oh.
You have to then close the poll and launch the poll.
Okay, so I have to end the poll?
End the poll. How many responses do you have?
I have 3.
Okay, so let's be sure that you've answered that first question. Has everyone answered the first question? How many responses do you have so far?
I still only have 3.
I think it's because we can't click submit.
I can't click submit even if I answer 2. And if I try to erase the
because
second,
we have 3 questions. So this is a beautiful example of what happens when we don't pre-test things. So let's do this, Yasmin. Give me 1 second. Let me finish the sentence before you act. Let's close the poll, right? And what I want for students to do is to look at the questions, because we'll launch the poll at the end. So hopefully you're maybe taking a few notes, and feel free to either make a screenshot or write down these questions. So let me read each of the questions, and at the end, we will do the poll. This is a classic example of pivoting, right? If something didn't work the way that you wanted it to work, what are you going to do to recover, right? So our first question, right? What industry can use human-centered design thinking? So students, if you want to write that down, we're going to launch the poll again with all 3 questions at the end. The second question, how many steps are there in the design thinking process? The third question, which of the design thinking steps is the most important? Okay, so students, give me a reaction. Have you had time to write those down or to commit them to memory? Give me a reaction. Yes, no. Okay, perfect. Thank you, Aisha. Okay, great. Let's see, going to my second screen. Okay, excellent. All right. Tanuja, you okay? Trikal, okay. Sujit put it in Anisha put it in there. How about Sakshi, Trikal? Okay, good. Tanuja, you're okay? Excellent. Okay, so we've got that. Let's close the poll, Yasmin, and we'll relaunch it at the end. All right, great. So back to the slides. We have that first question. Let's see what comes next on our slides. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over here to Yasmin. She's going to take us through the steps of design thinking, and I'll unmute myself when we come back for our role play.
All right, so Dr. Conway gave you an overview of what design thinking is as a concept and what are the applications of it. So now let's talk about the different steps that are actually in the design thinking process. So design thinking has 5 steps. And we use the word steps very loosely here because design thinking is not a linear process, right? We put it in these little nice boxes just because our brains usually like to process things that way. It makes them easier to understand. But as I explain and talk about this more, you'll see that it's actually a little bit more of a loopy loop. So design thinking starts with what we call empathy gathering. So Dr. Conway explained that design thinking is all about people, right? There's a focus on people. You are designing for the end user. You're designing an experience for the end user. So in order for you to be able to effectively do that, you have to start with empathizing with that end user. And what that means is usually you'll have to really immerse yourself in what that user is going through in order for you to be able to fully empathize with them. So that involves things like conducting interviews, doing field research, field observations, getting as close as possible to imitating the life experience of that end user. Then once you've had time to collect that information, you go to the next step of defining your problem. So while for design thinking, you start with a general idea of what you're trying to address, you don't actually formulate your specific problem until you have talked to your end user to make sure that you are effectively defining the problem based on what they tell you and not based on what your perspective is telling you that you think the problem is. Once you've had time to define the problem, then you go to the next step, which is ideation. So you brainstorm different solutions of what you think will help address that problem you've defined. And here I want us to remember what Dr. Conway talked about, that when you ideate, you don't do that as an individual, right? You collaborate, you do that as a team, you build off of each other's ideas. Then once you have an idea, you go to the next step of prototyping. So prototyping here, it doesn't have to be something fancy where you go to a manufacturer and you manufacture this really cool gadget, right? It can be something as simple as creating a storyboard, creating a drawing of what your product and service is. Because the purpose of this prototyping step is that you can get as fast as possible to the testing step, where you actually show your end user what the product or service or experience is going to look like and get their feedback. Because once again, you don't want to be designing limited by your own perspectives, right? And you'll hear this kind of referred to in entrepreneurship as the lean model of entrepreneurship, right? You're quickly getting out in the field, quickly testing, quickly getting feedback, and then modifying. And the reason that I refer to it in the beginning as a loop is that because you see here, once you have gotten you've done your prototype, you get your feedback, and then most of the time you're going to have to improve your product or design or whatever it is. And you go back to prototyping and you get testing and you refine. And this actually most of the time continues even after you've designed a final product or service, right? So once you've gone past that stage and you've launched, that doesn't mean that you stop with that process, right? You want to continue with that process to make sure that you're continuing to meet the demands of your end customer. So you'll see that it's more of a loop, right? It's not a linear process. So this is our second polling question. So we're just gonna skip over it. So just to summarize kind of what we talked about, right? You start with here, right? The empathy process where you accept, right? The feedback, the information that you get from everyone. It's very important to keep an open mind here, right? Then you synthesize that information to define your problem. Then you ideate, prototype, you show, test, iterate, right? So this diagram, I like it because it's more of a circle, right? So it shows you that it's not a step-by-step, you just go through this one line, you're going in a circle. All right. And these are just some of the things that you keep in mind when you are using the design thinking process. So remember, human-centered, that's at the heart of it, right? You have to be designing for people. You have to be mindful of the process, right? So you have to keep in mind what are the different steps that I'm going to have to be taking and planning for it, right? You have to focus on collaboration, right? And we use the word radical because you really, really have to collaborate. That's your entire process will not work if you are not willing to collaborate. And that means being open-minded, that means being able to accept others' ideas. And finally, these two things here, right? The culture of prototyping, the action, and the show don't tell, right? These three things are very important because for years, right, business was all about just sitting in a room, doing all your fancy computer research, and then developing a product and immediately launching it without prototyping, without actually showing people how it works. And that if you do that now, most of the time you're going to fail, right? So it's very important that you prioritize having something to show your customer, have a culture of prototyping, and do that as fast as possible. So the bias towards action here is important, right? Don't sit in a room researching forever, just get out of the door and do it.
Can I make one point here?
Please.
So I think this is really important, and Dr. Banerjee, I think that you would agree, and I know Surabhi is on the call as well, right? When we launched the Global Links program first in India in 2015, and now we're right in 2021, this idea of getting students to share amongst themselves, getting the mentors, the volunteers, the change makers to share among themselves, and this, I love how Yasmin said it, this radical collaboration, right? This is a culture shift for many Indian students. But I think if you, Dr. Banerjee, or if Surabhi would like to comment on how the collaboration helped the achievement of the goals for the program.
I'll begin with an experience that Surabhi doesn't know. She can share her part. That I call it your naming it radical collaboration is so appropriate, Yasmin. When Dr. Conway and I first approached a particular organization, that the students would mentor the businesses. And we had used the word mentor the business women. And the person on the other side of the table said, what do the students know? What will they mentor? So mentoring is not expected in India to be from peer level or from juniors. The idea of reverse mentoring, the idea of peer mentoring did not exist 5 years back. So definitely this radical collaboration, that there is a two-way learning process. And Surabhi will share her points because when she won the award, I remember she started with the two-way learning process. Surabhi, would you like to add something?
Yes, ma'am. I totally agree with Dr. Conway when she said it is a culturally very a new perspective for Indians. And I will agree with you also when you said that this concept of reverse mentorship is very new to Indians. And exactly that was the first reaction when we thought of students mentoring businesses. What is a 20-year-old kid going to do with a business that is running for over 20 years, right? So I think, but now as we've completed 3 cycles in India, and now with Glyph, I think we are making a change. And I think this is with Glyph, we will empower many more students and businesses. And that's all.
Thank you both so much for sharing. So that kind of emphasizes then this last slide that I want to show about design thinking, which is that you're kind of reversing your process of do then think to first you're thinking and then doing, right? So you're spending time researching, collecting data from your end users, and then you're taking that information, testing with it, right? All right. So before we start our activity, I just want to pause to see if anyone has any questions that they want us to go more into detail before Dr. Conway and I switch roles and become other people for this activity.
I wish to add something which is not really content related, that initially we did not have a lot of students from NBU and TU. So, but now we have them joining. So I feel very good that they are hearing. This is a wonderful thing that I learned 5 years back, and I'm still paying so much attention to learn this. I'm glad so many have joined.
Thank you, Dr. Banerjee. I also noticed that, and I'll just remind the students to please not worry. We are recording the session for this very reason. So we will share it with Dr. Banerjee, Aisha, and Arkadipta, and you'll be able to have access to it if for some reason you had to come in late. And then we do have a question. It's a good question. Can you see it, Yasmin? You want to take it?
Sure. So, you know, the steps, it's kind of an interesting question, right? Is it customizable? Do they have to be followed? So you have to do all the steps in the process, even if they look a little bit different or you refer to them as something else, right? But for this process to work, you really have to go through the entire process, right? Because if you think about the 5 different steps and you think, all right, what is it that you can skip? You can't really skip empathy gathering, right? That's at the soul of everything. You can't skip the problem definition, because if you do not have your problem defined correctly, none of what's going to follow is going to be done correctly. You can't skip brainstorming, right? Because that's when the development, the ideas, the business is kind of born. And you absolutely cannot skip prototyping and testing, right? Because that's, remember we said that's when companies get into trouble, when they don't seek feedback, when they don't have something to show. So all the steps are equally important. And for it to work, you have to follow it fully, right? For it to really work for your business.
Mm-hmm. And I would add, I 100% agree with what you're saying. I would add what might happen is steps 2 through 5, if you will, might change the length of time, right? Because as you become better at this through repetition yourself and your team becomes more familiar with the steps, you can prototype faster. Mm-hmm. You can get feedback and incorporate it faster. So the empathizing still takes time, because you have to talk to people in their setting and in their environment. That's why this program sends you to the field or sends you to the entrepreneur, if not physically, right, in this electronic environment. And we ask you to take photos and take videos and all of this so that you understand the business person in their space, not in a laboratory. Mm-hmm. We have one more question, Yasmin. Do you see that one?
Yeah, do you want to take that one, Dr. Conway?
I'll take it. Yes, yeah. Exactly what I was thinking. So the answer is yes. The question is, does design thinking and traditional quantitative market research coexist? The answer is yes. Okay. However, the question is, which should come first? And the answer is design thinking, right? Because quantitative, as soon as I make a quantitative question, I'm making an assumption that I understand what is important to the user or to the person for whom I'm designing the product. And if I don't actually empathize and understand that, then I'm asking questions that are relevant to me, the researcher, but not relevant to the consumer. So that's very important. They can coexist, design thinking and quantitative marketing research, but the empathy gathering, the qualitative research that you get out is a much deeper, richer understanding of that. And Arkadita, how is design thinking different from modern marketing? So I'm going to share a story. Arkadita, you wrote this question. How is design thinking different from quote unquote modern marketing? So some years ago, when I was first introduced to design thinking, so I'm a marketer, right? My PhD is in marketing. My career before education was in marketing. And I sort of said to myself, this is really just marketing, right? This is just a new name for an old thing. And as I came to understand it more, what I would say is marketing often focuses on the customer needs after I've designed something, right? And so design thinking says, slow that down and take time to empathize. So you're right that good marketers understand what their consumers want, but most marketers, I'll quote Steve Jobs, most marketers ask the customer what they want. And Steve Jobs would say, from Apple, right? Steve Jobs would say, you can't ask a customer what they want. They don't know what they want because you are thinking innovatively and way ahead of them. But if you go into the consumer's home, right, with this idea, this empathy, and you see how they're solving their problems, then you start to design something that makes sense and will answer their problems. So it's much more focused on the problem statement. So I'm glad you asked that. Very good question, Arkady.
Any other questions?
Just for time, let's go ahead because I really want to do this. I really want to be an actor today. I really want to be an actor.
All right. So I think what we should do is we should do the poll and then go to the activity because we have more questions related to the activity once we're done with that. So I'll launch the poll. Give you guys a few minutes to get it done and we'll see who was paying attention. Can you see all the questions?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And once I hit all of them, then I can submit.
Okay.
Dr. Banerjee made a nice comment. Innovation is born out of inquiry and complaint. Yes. What is not working? Dissatisfaction. Exactly. And that's sometimes what we have to ask our users, right? Dr. Banerjee, what are you unhappy about?
Right. So I have read this small caselet where it talks about that most of the innovation came when customers came to ask for something and we did not have it. So it sets the tone that we need to satisfy this unsatisfied. So when customers come to ask for something and that it is not available, so that sets the marketer and the producer to design it. Excellent. And complain, of course. Complaints arise because there was a fault in the product or service.
All right. I see 13 out of 16. So I believe we're good because a couple of those are us. So I'll go ahead and end the poll now and we can look at the results. All right. So we see that. What industry?
Hold on, we don't see it yet. Did you share poll? There it is. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So what industry can use human-centered design thinking? You had 4 options and the correct answer here is all of the above, right? So it's not limited to just business. All different industries can use it to problem solve whatever it is that the pains are. How many steps are in the design thinking process? There are 5. Remember, we said empathy, define the problem, ideate, prototype, and test. So there are 5 there. And which of the design thinking steps is the most important? I know that sounds like it might be a trick question because I said empathy is at the heart of it, but really all of them are equally important, right? You can't stop at empathy. You have to do the whole process to make sure that it works.
So hold on one second, because I had to scroll up to see the answer and I got distracted of listening to you. So is empathy the most important, or all are equally important? What did you say? Could you repeat yourself, please?
All are equally important, right? So we start with empathy. It's very important. That's the starting point, the heart of the process, but all are equally important because they have to work together. All right. Okay, so let's role play. So for this activity, Dr. Conway will become Jaime and I will become, let's just say, Sam. All right. So what is this design activity going to be? So we have a design challenge that we want to address. And our design challenge is, how might we improve the experience of purchasing a new TV for customers? So we are limited on time, so we won't have time to go through the entire 5 steps, but what we will display or demonstrate is the empathy process. So what we're going to do is, when you're gathering empathy, one of the tools that you can use is this thing called empathy mapping. And basically what it is that you interview your customer, your end user, you prepare some interview questions for them around the problem that you're trying to solve. And then as they answer your questions, what you do is you take notes on, what did this person say? What were kind of their thoughts based on their face? What do you think they were feeling? What were they doing, right? And you kind of just take some notes, insights about how the interview went. And based on that, you formulate a problem statement to then start brainstorming solutions. So for this exercise, Dr. Conway will be the customer who is trying to buy a new TV, and I'm going to be the store manager who is interviewing her to figure out, what is it that's not working about our process that we need to fix for our customers? Okay, are you guys ready? All right. Hi, Jaime, how are you today?
Oh, I don't know. I'm feeling a little frustrated.
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. Are you here to buy a new TV today?
Yes, I need a new TV because my old TV broke.
Oh, well, that sucks. Let me ask you a question. Out of curiosity, what is your favorite TV show that you loved watching on that TV before it broke?
Oh, my favorite TV show is, oh my goodness, what is my favorite TV show? Name that price that pricing game.
Oh, that is a fun show. Well, I'm here to help address that issue, and I'm sorry that you're feeling frustrated. So tell me, why are you feeling frustrated? What is your least favorite part of buying a new TV?
My least favorite part is there's just so much information, right? So I check the website, I try to do some research, I try to write down what I like about this TV, what I don't like about this TV. I compare the products. It's just overwhelming. And I don't know who to trust. Like, you're a salesperson. Maybe you'll just try to sell me the most expensive TV, right? And so I feel like I'm wasting time and I just want to watch my TV shows.
That's interesting to hear. So tell me, Jaime, then, what is your favorite part of buying a new TV?
Well, of course, there's always fun when you have something new, right? Everybody wants to have a new experience, and I think my TV is going to be better, right? And I think I'll be able to see and hear the show better, right? So I'm a little bit anxious because it's a lot of money, but I'm also excited.
So if you think about your past TV purchasing experiences, what was something that went really well for you?
Something that went really well. I asked my friends for some recommendation, and that was helpful because they know what I like. I went into the store and I watched a lot of TVs, so that helped me to know exactly which TV I liked and which had a better color and better sound. Um, I actually, it's been a while since I bought another TV, but whenever I have to spend a lot of money, I always postpone it, right? Because I'm nervous about how much to buy. And I also liked when the salesperson helped me to think about the reliability of the product and the size of the product.
Hmm. So, what would you say then are the things that you look for when you buy a new TV? If you could pick maybe the top three things in a TV that you look for.
Top three things I look for in a TV: reliability, because they're expensive. I don't want to buy another one too soon. The size, because I have to think about my apartment and what's going to fit in my apartment. And the price.
Hmm. All right. Well, thank you, Jaime. I appreciate that feedback. I will revert back to my sales team and we will be sure to work to address your problem.
Thank you. I look forward to it. I really want a new TV.
Thank you. All right. So, what I was doing here, right, is I was observing and listening to Jaime in context, right? So, she came into the store and I was asking her what was paining her about the process as she was in the purchasing experience, right? I didn't go to her home because the environment wouldn't be familiar. She wouldn't be in the store looking at all these TVs, feeling overwhelmed, right? So, you want to recreate the experience as much as possible so that you are getting accurate information. And then if you listen to Jamie's answers, right, it wasn't just what she said, right? I was also looking at her face. Her face was looking a little bit anxious. She was looking frustrated, right? So it's important for you to also look at what the person is doing, the nonverbal communication. And then you take all of that information and you put it in this little empathy map, right? So you write down, what did the person say? So Dr. Jaime said that she wants something reliable. She is looking for the best size. She was looking for something different from what she already has, right? But then she was also thinking, right? She was saying, what is the best for me? There are just too many options. I don't know what to do. So those are some of the things that she was thinking about as she buys a new TV. And then she was also feeling overwhelmed, right? She said that she was feeling overwhelmed. She's excited about getting a new TV, but she's a little overwhelmed by how many options there are. She's not sure who to trust because she's worried about the salespeople trying to, rob her. And then she said that one of the things that she does is ask her friends. So that is important, right? It's important for you to know that she asks her friends, that she compares products, so that you, as the salesperson, you know what to do, how to design, how to market for those customers when you know how they buy or how they make their decision, right? So then what I would do as the salesman and sales manager or store owner is then I would take all of that information, define the problem of trying to help Jaime narrow down her options, right? And it sounded like, based on her answers, based on this empathy map, what would you say, in your opinion, is the problem that we're trying to address here? What is Jamie's biggest pain in trying to buy a new TV?
So do you want us to type something in the chat?
Yes, type it in the chat, please.
So what, just repeat the question one more time for me, Yasmin?
Of course, based on the answers and based on this empathy map, how would you put in one statement, one sentence, what is Jamie's problem when buying a new TV? Okay. Too much information. It's a lot of information. Thank you, Dr. Banerjee. Yeah, it's too much information, right? She said several times that she's overwhelmed, she's stressed, she doesn't know what to do. What is the correct option? Yeah, so which one should she buy? How much is the correct price? Is this a good price for this TV, right? She's overwhelmed with the amount of information, with the amount of options that are out there, and she doesn't know what to choose, right? Very good, right? So this idea of ease, of overwhelmed, of being uncomfortable, right? That's kind of the theme here of what Jaime's biggest issue is. So then, now what I want you guys to think about is, based on what you said is the problem statement, what are some ideas that you can think of that we can use to help Jaime solve her TV purchasing problem, to make that experience better? And you can type that in the chat as well. And don't worry about the idea being perfect or the best, right? We're giving you a very limited time, so just write ideas as they come to you, right? That's an important part of creativity, is that you just write out whatever ideas come to you, and your team will kind of build on these ideas, right? So it might be a little bit uncomfortable, but you need to practice not perfecting your ideas. Okay. Dr. Conway, we're going to say something?
No, just reading.
Okay. Video reviews, okay. After gathering her information, direct her, right? So talk to her, see what she needs, and then direct her to what would fit her. Show her TVs where there has been ratings by customers, right? Because she did say she doesn't trust the salesman. So maybe if we show her what the customers say, she would trust that more. All right, so yeah, 2 ideas there about the 3 factors that are most important to her. So give her options that would fit these 3 things, right? Even if they're not the most expensive, right? And that would make her trust the process more. And that was one of the ideas at the beginning, right? That maybe don't focus so much about selling her a good brand, but show her a product that's quality, that's not the most expensive. That would make her trust the process more. All right. Oh, an IT system that she can play around with, and it would give her the best recommendation. Yeah. Right. So we could combine that into kind of several of these ideas can be combined, right, into a system that has video reviews, customer reviews, where she can customize what she's looking for, and it would give her a recommendation. And that would take away her being overwhelmed, being stressed, not knowing what is the best option based on what she prioritizes. And then also her being afraid that a salesman is going to just sell her the most expensive one, right? She's the one customizing her experience, and it's giving her the best option for her. Very good, right? A return policy to let her know that, it's not that big of a commitment. You can always come back and return it if you really don't like it. Very good. These are all really great ideas. Thank you all for participating. So you see that here we try to imitate the process a little bit by going through the empathy gathering, the definition, and the ideation. In a normal setting, what we would do then, let's say we decide to proceed with that app idea, the IT idea, what we would do is we would draw it out, or we would put together some slides, and then go back to Jaime and tell her, here's what this interface would look like. Here are what the features would be. Here's the buttons you would click. What do you think of this? How do you like it? And then as she's testing it, not only do you ask her how she feels about it, but again, similar to the empathy gathering, you write down how she's feeling when she first looks at it. Does she seem to like it? Does she seem excited with it? Does she seem frustrated by it, right? So again, you take notes on everything she does, and then her feedback, and you reiterate, redesign, etc., to make sure that you have this perfect, right, or ideal or most optimized version. And ideally, right, you would also not just do that with Jaime, right, because it is an N of 1, and you want to make sure that you're representing as many consumers, as many end users as you can. Obviously, because time is limited, I could only interview one person, but in an ideal setting, you would go out in the field and try to gather data from people with different background settings, right? So I interviewed Jaime, who was a woman, right? So you would go out and try to interview a man or try to interview a younger person, someone who's a bit older, right? So you get a range of different age groups, different demographics, and those demographics would match who your customer is, right? So you don't want to go out and interview someone who never buys TV from your store, right? So you have to understand who is your end user, then get a pool of people that you're interviewing that fit that target customer or customer group, do the research, and then go through the process.
Can I add a comment, Yasmin?
Yes, please.
Sometimes with the human-centered design thinking, we throw out these 5 steps and we give it an idea, and then we think that this is a really difficult process. But so Yasmin is using the word ideate, right? She's saying ideate. Well, what you just did in the chat, right, which was brainstorm or just share a lot of ideas, that is ideating, right? So you're brainstorming, getting those things out, and you're thinking through what is the core problem, right? So someone typed in there, she wants the process to be easier, right? So how might I make the process easier for my customers to purchase the TV? And you've brainstormed a lot of ideas that, as Yasmin is saying, you can then prototype or test, right? So prototype and test. I don't want you to get hooked up in, I have to know these exact words. Rather, I have to build confidence in the steps and my ability to do those steps. So when you go out to your entrepreneurs, right, and you want to say, I'm here today, I'm going to take some photos, I want to understand more about your business, and of course, so I can remember those, I'm going to take some notes. Is that okay with you if I take some notes down? And you can take those notes, right, around the think, do. So we're going to share that form with Aisha and Arkadipta so they can share it with you all. But you want to organize your thoughts around, what is she thinking about the business? What is she afraid of the business? What does she love about the business, right? So those are feelings that you can have, right? So thinking about how to use this when you go to meet your entrepreneurs as well. But it is very important. Like if you just pull out a piece of paper and start writing down while she's talking, she might get very nervous. What are you doing with that? No, why are you doing that? So it's better to explain why you are taking notes, because you want to be sure that you are providing recommendations that are going to align with her needs. Does that make sense? Okay, great. Excellent. Okay. All right, good. Thank you, Yasmin.
All right. So now what I want you guys to think about what are some design thinking challenges that you can think of related to chain of change. So remember that design challenge for the activity that Dr. Conway and I just did was, how might we improve the TV purchasing experience for customers? So think about something similar, right? Similar wording to relating to chain of change. How would you formulate some of those ideas? This could be related to the students, the program, the entrepreneurs. All right. Yeah, so Dr. Conway and Dr. Banerjee started us off there, right? How might we communicate among students to share learning better and help the entrepreneurs more? So that's one. Dr. Banerjee said, how could we sustain the motivation that students have when they join? Very good, right? So these two things, right, you could easily imagine how you would go through the design thinking process with them, right? And these are things, right, that Dr. Conway and I can sit in a meeting, Dr. Conway and I and Dr. Banerjee, we can sit in a meeting and think about, oh yeah, I have an idea about how to communicate better, and I have an idea about how to sustain motivation. However, if we talk to the students, right, if we talk to the entrepreneurs, we are going to design better solutions, right? Because we're not the students, we're not the ones experiencing the program, we're not the entrepreneurs that are being helped. So even if we might know the program very well and have great ideas about here's how we could improve it, we're not going to actually design great solutions until we talk to the end user. So that's another thing that I just kind of want to conclude with here, is that without design thinking process, sure, you can design, you can think of solutions. It's not like you can't. However, it is not going to combine these three aspects of what makes a product or a service great, right? Which is combining the desirability, the feasibility, the viability, and of course, what Dr. Conway mentioned at the beginning, the sustainability, right? So to get to that nice little sweet spot, design thinking is what helps you get there and ultimately just have a better business or organization. So that's all I had for you all. So we have a couple of minutes left if you have any questions or final thoughts.
I have a final thought as the students formulate their questions. And I typed something in the chat because it's interesting, and maybe we didn't give enough time, but it's interesting that students didn't, if you go back one slide, Yasmin, and we said, what other design thinking challenges can you think of related to chain of change, right? And the students didn't say anything. Again, maybe we didn't give you enough time because we know we only have 1 hour. But I want to challenge the students because, again, this is a cultural shift for you. When we're asking you that, whether it's me, Yasmin, Dr. Banerjee, Aisha, Pradipta, Surabhi, whoever it is that is saying, what do you think? What other things might we, and you're like, oh, I'm just a student, I shouldn't be telling professors what to do, right? Then it's design thinking. What I wrote is like democracy. If you don't participate and if you don't welcome participation, so our welcoming of your participation is very sincere, we just don't get the best results, right? Or we get results that don't serve anyone. So don't ever feel shy when we ask you what, right? And then don't be disappointed if your idea doesn't get chosen or adopted, right? Because sometimes we feel like, well, I gave the idea, therefore it must be taken, right? Remember what Yasmin said, we're gathering ideas from lots of different people and putting over, you know, some context and history. So don't ever be afraid to contribute. The question to ask you to contribute is important, and that requires trust, right? So as we get to know each other better, you trust more that when I ask a question, I really want you to have a question. We will trust more to know how much time we need to give you to answer the question, because as Aditya is saying, wait, I have one. You just didn't give me enough time to type. Sorry about that, Aditya. Right. Any other thoughts or questions from the students or from Dr. Banerjee, Aisha, Kadita, Surabhi?
I had a question, Yasmin. What is the difference between brainstorming and ideate?
You know, they're pretty much the same, right? It's just different wording, but okay. Because the ideation process involves brainstorming. Really, you just give it the title of ideate, which means that you're coming up with an idea to solve the problem that's in your problem definition. But the process, what goes on in that ideation step, is brainstorming. So as a team, you sit together, brainstorm different ideas, collaborate, build off of each other. So that's what ideate includes, is brainstorming.
I might say brainstorming is the technique that helps you to ideate. Can you give us the next slide, Yasmin? Because I really like the next slide too. We'll see if students have any other questions.
Like
also willing to take.
I could
sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. You go ahead. I could immediately take this slide and relate it to a challenge that Gargi of North Bengal is facing with her entrepreneur who has a restaurant. His desire is to have an app for home delivery of the food. It is technically feasible because an app can be designed, but whether it is financially viable because the app designer has asked for 20,000 rupees at least, but whether it would add value worth more than 20,000 is what we are still debating. So at the basis of considering all these three junctions, Gargi is in a position where she is thinking all this. So I could apply this to one of the businesses that Chain of Change is handling just now.
Awesome. And Dr. Banerjee, the student, Gargi, might take the owner of the business through the desirability to understand what it is that the consumer wants in the delivery app, because maybe they could get the price down because the seller of the app, right, the technology person is trying to build an app that's way more complicated than is needed either by the owner of the restaurant or, more importantly, the consumer of the restaurant, right? So I think that's so helpful to give a real example, and the design process can then be used to redesign the app in a way that's going to meet the needs of the restaurant owner and, most importantly, of his consumers.
Tomorrow we are meeting physically with all the Calcutta University students in an open air tea place. So we will discuss this, and I'm sorry, it's sad Gargi isn't there, but I'm sure all these businesses can be juxtaposed on this mode. We'll think about it because we'll have to now deal with them team by team.
Yes. And remember, we said this is an introduction, right? So, and Yasmin, let's go back to the full screen. We'll stop sharing. And remember that the Rollins students have had a lot of time and numerous classes to understand this process. So when you meet with the Rollins students, right, one-on-one, please be sure to ask them, like, just like what Dr. Banerjee and I did, how might I use design thinking to help my entrepreneur more? Like, this is what I want to know. How do I do that? So the students are kind of experts in this as well. So the Rollins students. So please feel free to ask them. How would closely knit teams which share a lot of views bring new ideas to the process? Trikal, that's a really good question. And here's an idea that we use a lot is we call it brainstorming with constraints. So not just asking the question, what other design thinking challenges can you think of related to chain of change, for example, but this is something that Dr. Banerjee, Yasmin, Arkadipta, Aisha, and I dealt with. How would you redesign chain of change if you couldn't meet physically, right? So the constraint, couldn't meet physically. What would you do if your budget was cut in half? How would you redesign the program if your budget was cut in half? How would you redesign the program if Yasmin won the lottery and decided to never come back to, oh no, I don't even want to think about that, right? So put some constraints on it, and that will actually spark more ideas, right? If you put the constraints on the brainstorming. So that's a very good question. And get out of the other thing we tell the students.
Sakti is here, Gargi's teammate. So Sakti will have heard the discussion we had.
Good.
Nice.
And the other thing I would say is get out of the building. Remember what Yasmin said? Like, you can't think that you can know this until you've actually gone there. And even if COVID is keeping you from physically going there, think about ways you might observe, right? Or talk to customers, or have a WhatsApp conversation, or share photos, right? Very good. All right, I think we're out of time.
We are. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for your participation.
Very good. All right, good luck in your meetings tomorrow with the folks in Calcutta. I wish that I was in Calcutta with you. Soon, I hope. All right. Thank you, Yasmin. She always does a lot of the work behind the scenes, and
Oh, thank
today
you.
she's presenting. So thank you very much, Yasmin.
Thank you
Thank you. It was
all.
wonderful, Yasmin. It was
Thank
so
you.
good.
Thank you all.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.